I knew something was off the moment her gleaming white Range Rover parked right by my mailbox, its oversized tires crushing a cluster of wildflowers. How dare she? It all started with a simple, smug little letter from the Homeowners and Lakeside Beautification Association, an organization I'd never heard of, declaring my private lake a community amenity. My heart hammered in my chest. Wasn't this a little insane? I mean, who just tries to take someone's property like that? The deed for my lakeside parcel, the thick, yellowing document passed down from my grandfather, clearly stated it was mine, all mine, down to the last drop of that serene, emerald water. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the world. And now this woman, this so-called Karen, was trying to steal it from me. I could already feel the familiar sting of frustration building in my throat, a pressure that promised a massive headache. Her name was Brenda, and she had the kind of performative confidence that made my skin crawl. She was all power suits and perfectly coiffed hair, a vision of suburban entitlement. "Oh, honey," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension when she'd first come to my door. "We're just modernizing the bylaws. It's for the good of the community. Don't you see?" My jaw tightened. "For the good of your community," I shot back, the words coming out sharper than I intended, a bitter taste in my mouth. "This isn't a lake. It's a pond. And it's on my private property." She just laughed, a sound like glass chimes in a hurricane, and waved a glossy brochure at me, a brochure filled with images of pristine beaches and happy families. It was all a lie, of course. My pond, nestled in a hollow of old-growth forest, was a wild, untamed place, its banks a tangle of reeds and ancient cypress roots. The very idea of turning it into a community amenity for her noisy parties with loud music and tacky floating lounges was a desecration. The air, usually so fresh with the scent of pine and damp earth, now seemed to carry the faint, cloying perfume of her entitlement. Things went from bad to worse. I started seeing her friends, her cohorts loitering on the edge of my property line, taking pictures, pointing, and whispering. I'd sit on my back porch, the screen door humming softly behind me, and watch them, feeling my gut twist with anxiety. One weekend, they even set up a picnic blanket 20 feet from the water's edge, their laughter echoing through the trees, a jarring, unwelcome sound. My peaceful morning coffee was ruined, the silence I cherished shattered. Did they really think this was okay? The quiet, desperate sigh that escaped my lips felt heavy, like it carried all the weight of my frustration. I called my lawyer, Mark, a good friend who'd handled my grandfather's estate. "I don't know what to do, Mark," I told him, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and helplessness. "She's trying to strong-arm me into giving up my land." Mark was calm, a solid voice on the other end of the line. "Don't you worry," he said. "We'll hit them with everything we've got. But I need you to give me everything you have on her and this so-called HOA. Everything." I spent the next 2 weeks digging. I scoured old property records, searched for her name online, and found a curious little detail. A previous address she'd lived at in a different state. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. The night before the hearing, I called Mark, my voice hoarse from hours of searching. "I found something," I whispered into the phone, and relayed the information. Mark was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the faint click of a keyboard on his end. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." I had no idea what he'd found, but a tiny spark of hope, a flicker of light in a long, dark tunnel, ignited in my chest. I fell asleep that night dreaming of my lake, its glassy surface reflecting the moon, the only sound the gentle rustle of the wind. The next morning, I woke up feeling more determined than I had in weeks. This wasn't just about a piece of land. It was about the principle of the thing. She was a bully, and bullies don't deserve to win. The courtroom was stuffy and smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Brenda sat at a table across from me, her smirk a permanent fixture, her husband fidgeting nervously beside her. She had a slick lawyer who droned on about obscure land use codes and community benefit. I felt my anxiety returning, a cold fist tightening in my stomach. Was I really going to lose my home over this? Then Mark stood up. He didn't raise his voice or use flowery language. He just spoke, his tone measured and steady. He started by calmly debunking their claims, citing the ironclad language of my deed. Brenda's lawyer looked mildly annoyed, but not worried. And then came the twist. "Your Honor," Mark said, turning to the judge, "I have here documentation from the state of Florida regarding a similar legal matter involving Ms. Brenda Johnson." Brenda's face went white. She shot a look at her lawyer, who appeared to be sweating. "It seems," Mark continued, pulling out a file, "that Ms. Johnson and her husband were involved in a scheme to rezone and sell community land in a gated community, using a fraudulent homeowners association to skirt zoning laws. The court found in favor of the homeowners, and Ms. Johnson was ordered to pay a significant fine and serve community service." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Mark didn't stop there. He presented evidence that Brenda had created the Homeowners and Lakeside Beautification Association just 2 months prior, with herself and her husband as the only members. "This is not a community association, Your Honor," Mark concluded, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "It's a 2-person shell corporation created for the sole purpose of attempting to seize my client's private property." The look on Brenda's face was priceless, a mask of shock and fury, every ounce of her smug confidence draining away in an instant. It was a bitter, deserved end for her. Leaving the courthouse, the air felt lighter, the sky a more brilliant blue. I took a deep, shaky breath, and the tension that had been a constant companion for weeks finally began to dissipate. That night, I sat on my back porch, the soft glow of the moon on the water a silent comfort. The lake was mine. It had always been mine. And it wasn't just a victory of law, but a triumph of a simple truth. Justice, when it's served, can be a cold, hard slap to the face. You can't just seize what isn't yours. And some things, some places, are worth fighting for, no matter how intimidating the bully. The peaceful silence, now truly my own again, was the sweetest sound in the world.